Hi, everybody. How are you doing today on this Memorial Day weekend? My name is Rhiana Yazzie, and I am the artistic director of New Native Theater. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our third installment of Deep Dive into Native Theater, and so we are taking on subjects that don't usually get talked about. We are going into the corners of what it means to be Native artists making Native work, and we have two really fantastic guests this evening, and also please share the link. Let your friends know that you're watching. We are live on YouTube and on Facebook. I don't think I've done a Facebook Live ever before, so so I think that's exciting. It's a first for New Native Theater. So tonight we are talking about BIPOC bodies on the stage, and we have two amazing guests. Let me introduce them to you. Our first guest is Marcela Michelle, who is the artistic director of 20% Theater Company, now in its 15th and final season, and the artistic co-director and director of programming for Lightning Rod, a trans-led arts organization focused on legacy, development, and opportunity for QTGNC artists and activists. As an artist, she has also worked with Red Eye Theater, Pangea World Theater, Guthrie Theater's Dowling Studio, History Theater, Mixed Blood Theater, Pillsbury House Plus Theater, Mission Theater Company, Pioneer Place Theater Company, Patrick's Cabaret, all right, Umbrella Collective, Queertopia, and more. I think I almost named all of the theaters in the Twin Cities. As an educator, she has worked with Walker Arts Center, University of Houston, U of M, Twin Cities, Augsburg University, Macalester College. I think that's almost all the colleges and universities here in the Twin Cities, Uprising Theater, the Hennepin Theater Trust, and more. Her performance work focuses primarily on simultaneity. Mutability, and the Platonic ideal host. Oh, it's getting Aristotelian here. She is a mentee of Pangea World Theater and Art to Action's National Institute for Directing and Ensemble Creation, and this fall will be directing the world premiere of Brujeria for Beginners by Kyla Anali Salcedo for 20% Theater Company at Mixed Blood Theater. And our second guest is Rosy Simas, who is Seneca Huron Clan. Rosy Simas is a transdisciplinary and dance artist who has historically presented her work as a choreographer. Simas's projects merge movement with media, sound, and objects for stage and installation. She unites cultural concepts and images with scientific and philosophical theories to create work that is literal, abstract, and metaphoric. Her work weaves themes of personal and collective identity with family, sovereignty, equality, and healing. She creates dance work with a team of Native artists and artists of color driven by movement vocabularies developed through deep listening. Simas is a recipient of a Dance USA Fellowship, Joyce Award from the Joyce Foundation, McKnight Fellowship for Choreography, Guggenheim Creative Arts Fellowship, First People Fund Fellowship, and a Native Arts and Cultures Foundation Fellowship. So I think that's every single possible fellowship. And her dance works include Weave, Skins, and We Wait in the Darkness, which have toured Turtle Island and France with the support of NIFA, National Dance Project, MAP Fund, and National Performance Network. Oh my gosh, you can almost be intimidated by these amazing artists, but I'm excited. So welcome, Rosy and Marcela. Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm so excited. It's really wonderful to have both of you talking with me this evening. I think I'd just like to sort of start off to just sort of like pass it to you both to just hear how it is you got into the work that you're doing, and give us a little bit of that background of your journey. Rosy, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I don't have to mute or unmute myself, right? No.
I don't think so. It's
okay.
I love it when everyone's unmuted so we can just jump in and say whatever we want.
Sure. Rosy Simas, Seneca Heron Clan. I live here in Minnesota on unceded Dakota territory, and I am Haudenosaunee from Cattaraugus, but also the other Haudenosaunee. I have family that reaches all of the different Haudenosaunee lands. My background, I started in the performing arts fairly young. I went to performing arts high school here in the Twin Cities. We moved here when I was a kid. I went to a native survival school in the 70s, Red Schoolhouse. I think my performing really began with like an introduction to competitive powwow dancing, which I stopped by the time I was 12. I continued in the performing arts into college, and then started my own company in 1994, which lasted just a couple of years. It was a dance company for women and girls of color in the Twin Cities, and at the time, 1994, no one was interested in funding that. Moved around a bit. Started a studio and taught in Santa Cruz, California, and then in the Bay Area, New York City, and Montreal. And been back here since 2010, which I think is the longest period of time I've been here, and in the Twin Cities, and have been working primarily as an independent choreographer, and then now I have a nonprofit organization. I mean, I've had an organization, but now we're a 501c3 as of 2016.
Oh.
We're opening a studio next month in the Northrop King building for Native and transdisciplinary dance artists. Native and BIPOC, transdisciplinary, and dance artists. Sorry, it's a long. So that's who we're focused on, supporting. We start residencies for local artists in August. And I am just back from Colorado, where I was working on it in installation, which is a series of installations. The next one is at Hair and Nails Gallery in Minneapolis on, I think it opens June 20th, the day after Juneteenth. Was that what you wanted to know?
Yes, thank you, Rosy. And we'll go even deeper. Marcela, tell us about your journey, how you got to where you are.
Oh golly. I've been reflecting on this a lot recently, specifically, sort of more general reflection. I grew up, was born in San Antonio, Texas, Payaya land. Have ancestors, were Payaya and Corbiteclan, and from Senegal and West Africa, Congolese, and Spanish and Portuguese. And I came here to Minnesota. I grew up acting and singing and dancing in school and classes and all that good stuff. And came here right before I started high school back in 2008, and was still really involved, did competitive stuff. My first loves were really ballet folklorico and mime. I had the privilege of having a teacher who was a student of Marcela at the school in Paris, and Beverly Johnson, may she rest in power. And she really took me under her wing at a young age and taught me a lot. So then I came here and continued to be really involved in the arts in school. Went to a school that had a very well-funded arts program and was a part of the Hennepin Theater Trust Spotlight program. Got exposed to the city as a teen, got to do stuff at the Playwright Center as a teen. And then, I spent some time, I dropped out of high school, spent some time being reckless and wild, and eventually came here to Minneapolis and went out and was auditioning and really thought I wanted to be a classical actor, really thought I wanted to be doing Shakespeare, even more traditional plays by playwrights of color, August Wilson. And that ended up not really being the journey that I went down. I got involved in stuff at Red Eye, Patrick's Cabaret, what's now Umbrella Collective, doing a lot of devised work, experimental work. And then I got caught up in the burlesque circuit and spent time hanging out with those people, some dance stuff, some ballet, really all over the place. Before I found my home at 20%, and that really, Claire over at 20% really took me in and provided me with a lot of training, a lot of opportunities, on stage, off stage, really understood the importance of people like me being on the other side of the table. There's definitely now a big push to get people like me on stage, but it's still a who's running the show, who's picking the work, who's talking to funders, all that good stuff. So was really supported by Claire and 20%, and now am the artistic director at 20% for our final season, and started up Lightning Rod with my co-artistic directors, Keilana Lee Saucedo and Kat Purcell, which we have our first full season now, and that was born out of the annual event that we used to do every year, the first time at Intermedia Arts with Patrick's Cabaret, and then Kat and I were kind of producing it ourselves. Yoni Tamang came and helped us produce, and now we have a full season. And we're doing shows with Pillsbury. We've been invited to present work in the Dowling. So really a winding road here, a lot of time in a lot of different pockets and the different theater and dance and performance communities that we have here in the Twin Cities, to now, being a young leader in queer performance.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, wow. That you have basically touched on every single discipline possible as a performer. And I just find that so interesting, so as a person who is, in a body that doesn't look like what these Western art forms created these art forms for. How are we navigating this differently? And it's really, I find it just really interesting, because all of us here are, we run organizations and we uplift and create opportunities for other folks that have had similar experiences and other folks who look similarly to us. What is it about being a BIPOC body on the stage that necessitates just this full having to do more than one thing, having to continuously to search? Is that what are your thoughts about that? Is that a good thing? Does that allow us to specialize, or is it or is it or is it something that's sort of pushing us towards enlightenment? I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about that?
You know, I think that I personally love being a sort of generalist. I love having a really expansive toolkit. I love the freedom that knowing how to do lots of things brings me. But it definitely is born of a lack of space to specialize, like you named. A lot of times, a lack of resourcing or funding. And I, now definitely I'm in a place in my career where I'm experiencing more security. But that was very much not the case in the beginning. I definitely, if I wanted to pay my bills, if I wanted to keep food in my fridge, I had to be able to do 20 different shows in a year of varying disciplines and start a show as soon as I'm out of rehearsals for another one. And yeah, there's definitely a necessity, but I don't feel I like it. I personally like having the variety of skill set. I wish that it wasn't the case that it was common for people who don't necessarily want to be doing that, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's something that sometimes with me, I wonder. I mean, I do so many things as a theater artist, starting off as a playwright, but ultimately, the thing that I have over the last 12 years since starting New Native Theater have done the most has actually been producing, and it's a different part of the body, it's a different part of the soul and the head to do that, than it is to just sort of like sit in the seat of being a playwright, and yeah, and I do sometimes think like, oh well, I had if I had this luxury to just focus on one thing, would I do that? Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But also at the same time, there's so many things that running an organization and being a producer has just really brought a lot of joy, and being able to see how it affects the ecosystem. I think it's a really interesting thing in how BIPOC artists don't just affect their own career, but they really affect an entire ecosystem. Rosy, I really have felt that so much with your work, all of the different ways that you create, because also just hearing. I mean, you have such an expansive view of how you dig into your art, from like science to culture, from installations to choreography. I mean, you've touched so many different worlds and so many different people. How do you feel? How do you feel about that being sort of this ripple in the ecosystem that spreads out? Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I guess so many Native artists that I know work in multiple disciplines. I wouldn't say that all work with community at all. And what is working with community? I mean, I think I think it's a different question for different communities. And I'm not a person that is good at going to a protest, but I do work really hard to change the ecosystem, but from a different perspective. And I think it's from doing the work of trying to influence funders and presenters and museums, institutions, academia, in order to change that ecosystem so that it is generally more equitable. I feel like it's always been 50% of my work. I didn't really have a choice about that. I feel I would say, I guess because I agree with you that a lot of BIPOC artists do change the ecosystem, but there are that don't. They do what, and this is not a slam at all. They do their discipline and the work that they're doing, and that's all they do. That's what they do, because that's for some people. So, like in our nation, we just believe everybody has a different role. So this idea of like guilting people that they're supposed to be doing something else is actually anti-culture. It's like anti what so we all, like it's in the last 10 years, it's sort of been like it's accepted by my community that I'm an artist, but that also I am, somebody who, like, my other role is to do genealogy research and to, like, hang out with elder ladies and do genealogy. So, like, I have these two different roles. And part of my role of being an artist is changing the ecosystem. But that's not everybody's role as an artist, And I feel like it's really important to continue to tell funders and institutions that it's not fair to expect that all people do things in the same way. Like this idea that, like, if there aren't pictures of me all over Facebook at Standing Rock, then I'm somehow not a community artist. But that's not true. I work for my community in a different way. I did go to Standing Rock, but I didn't go there. I didn't want to be there as a cultural tourist. It's not my play. I went there to help, and then I left. I didn't want to be in the way of the people who were on the ground, doing really important work. And so I know that wasn't exactly what your question is, but I feel that that is something that's been on my mind lately. It's just been, I think, especially because of what has been going on in our community. I always address this as a dual pandemic. We are dealing with heightened systemic racism in our community. It is impacting people widely. We're also dealing with the intersection of racism and COVID-19, where it is impacting BIPOC people at a greater rate, and in different ways. And I think that there is, in our ecosystem, which includes funding and includes presentation and includes all of those things, that there is there's a way that powers that be latch on to certain types of actions as meaning certain things. And I just feel like, as a Native person, I don't want to be shamed or guilted into being any way than I am. Otherwise, I can't do my work. And my work is much more than just my artistic work. It's building space for other artists to be in. That was a very long answer.
You brought up a really interesting points. Marcela, was there something that particularly you were thinking in that?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I really resonate with a lot of what Rosy's saying. I think it's dangerous to try to homogenize action. I think that it is irresponsible to some people tend to the wheat, and some people know how to make bread. And you don't tell the person who knows how to plant the wheat that they have to make the bread. And if they don't, then they're not feeding people. I also am someone who, because of my experiences with police violence, specifically because of my time in the jail system, because of my PTSD, direct action in the form of marching and protesting in the way that has really emerged so beautifully here in this most recent uprising, which is an uprising in a lineage of uprisings. That's not really my role. That's not really where I am going to be the most effective. And where I do think I can be the most effective is as an artist who people pay attention to, as an artist who seeks and is provided opportunities, and who is fiercely dedicated to bringing her people with her. It's very much a practice, a politic, a spiritual moment for us at Lightning Rod. You know, when we're invited, we're bringing our people with us, you know, and that's where I feel I can have an impact, is in the work that I do, a work that reaches an audience that is intercultural, intergenerational, interracial, intergendered. I think that knowing where you're suited, knowing what your mission is, and not letting a dominant narrative tell you, for Black people, for Indigenous people, for people of color, for Native people, not letting something memeified dictate to you how you have to show up for your community, I think is really, really vital. I see it a lot in my generation. I see it a lot in the younger generation. A lot of these calls to action they have to be sort of memeable. They have to be quick, and they have to be sort of really digestible. And that doesn't always leave a lot of room for nuance. And sometimes these big blanket statements and the ways in which people try to sort of judge each other for how they are or are not showing up, this demand for a sort of cultural knowledge and purity that's just sort of being homogenized. I don't think that it is necessarily productive, and I think that it in some cases is actively dangerous. I know that for me to go to a place and take up space where people who need to put their attention elsewhere, that if they have to be caretaking me because I'm on the floor shaking and rolling, that I'm not really contributing to that moment.
Yeah. I'm really appreciating where this conversation is going, because it's really sort of opening up like what is on your hearts and minds right now, which I think is really important to acknowledge that here we are, maybe in the tail end, or maybe still in the middle of a pandemic, and then also with this continued more vocal, at least in a different way, this standing up against systemic racism, and of course here in Minneapolis, this being the nexus of where all of these global protests started happening. I think that that's a really it's a really interesting thing to dive into, about where is the BIPOC artist body expected to be, right? We're expected to be on the front lines. Not only are our bodies being victimized by systemic racism, by the justice system, but almost in a way by our funders. Do you find that? Or like even by our allies in some way, that it's sort of like, hey, how come you as an artist are not also there on the front line? Is there something wrong with you? Is there something wrong with your politic? How has, that's.
I mean, the expectation that we are super people, superhuman, super whatever, you know. I think it's a part of that. I think it's the dehumanization of our bodies, of our people, of our communities. I think it's not a big leap to go from, I think the images that people see when all they see are like magical Black people, magical Native people have this preternatural abilities and all, you know, have access to like literal magic, or who like in films and plays serve to like educate and further along the journeys of white people. I don't think it's a big leap to like receive that media and then also assume later as an adult that we have the time and space to be at the march, be doing bail support, be fundraising for our company, be choreographing a work, be in the work, do the talk back, come to the show, facilitate the workshop at the school. Like the idea that we're gonna be all of these things for all of these people absolutely is, you know, racism, definitely misogyny for those of us for whom that is applicable too. You know, we have these expectations of Black bodies, of Native bodies, of brown bodies, of bodies who are women or people we perceive as women. Yeah.
And it's not only those outward facing things, but there's so many battles that we are facing on the inside of the art form. You know, it really makes me think about the this anonymous group, We See You White American Theater, who has been putting pressure on basically predominantly white institutions to basically been putting them on blast. And it's an interesting thing, because I think that over the years, the ways that BIPOC folks have been fighting the system, especially as artists, you don't necessarily see that on the street, but you see all of this inside of the space while we're negotiating it and changing it, and in fact turning our backs on it many times. I mean, that's why New Native Theater exists. It's because it hurt so much to interface with predominantly white institutions and that worldview, that it just felt better. Like, why don't we make our own work? Why don't we create our own focus on our own strengths, right? But you know, there was also something else that you guys had. You brought up this sense of like cultural tourism, and also when you were talking, Marcela, it made me think about how, you know, when you talk about like the magical BIPOC doing all of these things, are there not also BIPOC who intentionally use that narrative to be complicit in white supremacy, get their way, or like show up at the protest with the selfie? I don't know. Is that something that you guys have also seen or experienced?
Well, I don't. Are either of you familiar with Resmaa Menakem's book? In his, gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. I'll remember it in a minute. Oh, My Grandmother's Hands. You know, he talks about white body supremacy, and though the book mainly talks about Black bodies and white bodies, this dichotomy, this thing that we all in some ways have to shed white body supremacy, this idea that Black bodies and brown bodies are there to support white bodies, that especially Black bodies are these, you know, invincible, strong beings who, you know, are, you know, don't feel pain, are indestructible, you know, that this is part of white body supremacy ideas, and that white bodies are fragile, they need to be cared for. And I think that we're just at a point where BIPOC folks are just able to begin to like metabolize and rid themselves from these ideas in their own beings and minds. And so just like Marcela was saying, that this idea that we have to be all of these different things, and in you know, Indian country, we see this a lot in I think the female leadership across Turtle Island, where women, and I can only speak, I'm only going to speak for Indian country, not for them, but on that subject. Just in the sense of like doing, you know, just more than is humanly possible, and then having shorter lives because of it. So it's definitely a health disparity as well. And I feel that the guilt or shame that comes around like not being able to be that person and not wanting to be that person is really intense, because I think it's not born out of a well-meaningness about the community, but it's born out of our own internalized white body supremacy, that we have these expectations of each other, that we take on that role. And anyway, yeah.
Yeah. You know, when you bring up health disparities, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. You know, when we think about, you know, and I can speak from my experience as a multidisciplinary theater artist. When I think about Native artists who are making full-time careers out of it, I think there are very few who have children, who have families, and I think that in contrast to what maybe their non-theater, I don't know, civilian peers and family, there's a totally different experience. And you know, and I was thinking about how the American theater functions in this very clear sense of white supremacy, in the way that it upholds the tenets of white supremacy and individualism. And though it's an incredibly collaborative art form, you really have to follow all of the rules of white supremacy in order to be successful in it. And ultimately, at the end, usually with a collaboration with a theater project, there's usually one person who gets the credit. And when you look at the path leading up to the actual show, and you look at the rehearsals, you look at the life cycle of getting into shows, there's a promise of funds at the end somewhere if you succeed and you do put in all of this hard work, you lift yourself by the bootstraps. So it kind of puts artists in this sort of like constant poverty. So economically, it's very difficult to make decisions around family planning, and purchasing a house, creating the kind of economic stability in order to have a family. And then when you just take a look at the hours, the kinds of hours, the unexpected hours, and that it takes to do theater, you're much more successful at it if you do not have somebody who's depending on you. So it encourages being single. It encourages a sort of lifestyle that's about individualism, and it disrupts the family, especially the BIPOC family. And when you look at American Indian people and Indigenous people, here we are, just getting off of the tails of outright genocide, and yet we want to do theater, which in itself does not encourage us to have families and children, and it doesn't create safe spaces and thriving spaces for us to have families and children. And I just find that such an incredible burden for the BIPOC body to have to go through all of this in order to just participate in this field, right? It's and folks don't, and and I think that when we're trying to dismantle white supremacy in these fields, we really have to take a look at, well, is this process friendly to you being able to have children and a family, right? Is this process friendly to you creating relationships, right? And a lot of times it's not, because you have to be in small groups and away from relationship creation. It's almost antithetical in a way, how you build relationships, but really they're not relationships. I can think of so many times where a show's come together, everyone bonds, and then you disband, and you're like, hey, whatever happened to
Yeah. That's one of the things that being in ensemble, it really feels vital in combating. We just announced the ensemble that we're going to be working with for a year, and that's a year of, there's not a goal to make a product. There will be a show, but the show isn't really, we're not like in rehearsal. We are just committed to gathering regularly, spending so much amount of time together over the course of a year, getting paid to spend that time together, to teach each other, to learn from each other. And it's hard for me to imagine going back to being a capital A actor and this very intense, very brief way of relating. And not working really. I mean, I have worked with the same people really intensely for the last few years, and it feels like such a privilege, because I come from what you're talking about, Rhiana, where it's like you have this intense bonding, the show happens, and then it's kind of over. And it is hard to, we talk about health and these ideas, the science that is present about the impact, the cellular impact that these traumas have, the racial violence has, the intergenerational trauma, that the way that it ages us, the things that we go through, BIPOC people, that ages us. And the life expectancy for Black trans women in America is 35 years. That is the average number that I can expect to live to. And that really does a lot. That really, I feel the weight of that clock. I feel a fear, knowing that, and I think a lot about family. And I think, as someone who would like to have children, as someone who, went through foster care, is estranged from a biological family that isn't prepared to hold me the way that I need to be held. It's really important to me. And I think about this way of the grind. I think about the hustle that I'm in, and the pressure of the work that I do, and how deep I feel it, the intensity with which I feel a need to change the standard that exists currently, to provide opportunities for artists like me, to make sure that they have access to the training that they need if they want to be in this field really working professionally. How do I do that and prepare for a family at the same time? And how do I make sure that I get it all in while I'm alive? When I have the media telling me constantly to step outside my door is to face certain danger.
Right.
It's
that really shows like I love how you said that, this truth, and it just shows this sort of more holistic experience of what it is to be a BIPOC body. the dangers we're asked to experience, the dangers that we experience and we do not ask. I also think that as we are striving towards, you had mentioned early on in both of you had mentioned early on in this conversation how because of this racial reckoning that, oh, hey, I'm getting a bit more work, right? But at the same time, it's sort of like, okay, yeah, you can hire this body, put it on your stage, you can check that box, but don't you think you have a responsibility, these predominantly white institutions or any institution that we work for, to also understand, to know that a Black trans woman, their life expectancy is 35. Don't they also have the responsibility to know that Indigenous people and American Indian people experience these incredibly high rates of and I could say what all of these deficits and also shorter lifespans. So I feel like they must take this into consideration when they hire us, and they must take it into consideration because they treat artists so disposably. It's like, oh, if this Black trans woman doesn't work, well, we've got another one. Or if this Native woman doesn't work, we can go find another one. We're so disposable. And it's sort of like, well, I think if you're going to pull us and invite us in, you need to invite everything about us and you need to be responsible for this. So if you're going to be causing pain, PTSD, trauma in the experience of working with you, that just doesn't make any sense. And in fact, they're inviting us to experience, I don't know, more deficits. Rosy, do you have thoughts about that? As as a leader of an organization and as a person who makes work in this field like that.
Well, I think in the situations that you're speaking about, these are not people who are considering, or institutions that are, well, they're considering, but they don't really have any idea what relationality is. A recent example is I'll try not to be revealing, but I applied for something and then I was told, you're number 3, and if the other 2 people don't accept, then we'll offer it to you. And I was like, great, okay, I know it's an off year, whatever. And then they came back to me and said, oh, we offered it to a 3rd person and they accepted, but you shouldn't feel bad because the other 3 people were all BIPOC. And I just thought, oh, I didn't know we were all interchangeable. I don't know what to say to that, except for that, I know none of them were Native. I know none of them were Haudenosaunee. I know none of them were Seneca. So it's not, there's nothing really interchangeable about that. And as well, this institution is on Haudenosaunee land. And so I find it even more out of touch with relationality. So, and I just think that that's true of a lot of this sort of exchanging one for another. It's really transactional and it's in the whole way that things like that are yeah, I mean, I think things are getting a little bit better. Back when I first started touring, I would and I don't know if this ever happened to Emily Johnson, but I would get told, well, we're presenting Emily this year. So yeah, I'd love to compare notes with her someday. We're presenting Emily this year, so we can't present you. We already, and so basically saying to me, well, we already have our native in the season. And so that's a really, bizarre thing thing because you're talking about two people who are from two nations that are completely on the opposite ends of Turtle Island from each other, with very different experiences and very different backgrounds in how we make work. And so this idea that we're all like this, like homogenized, this idea that all Native people from all of these different nations are just somehow interchangeable. And yet I'll also say that we hold some responsibility for creating that myth. To a certain degree as Native people. We the more that we uphold a sort of pan-Indianism, the more we are contributing to the stereotypes that all Native people, are the same, that we all have a spirit animal and we all go in a sweat lodge and we all live in a teepee and we all, and it's just not, although we have many common things, and we have more common things now because we're so much more intertribal, and that's a beautiful thing if you ask me, but it isn't the same thing as the concept of pan-Indianism, as if any Indian is one or the other, it doesn't matter. And so I think we see that really clearly in the entertainment industry and in academia and in publishing and in the performing arts.
There's this suggestion of interchangeability also puts us in competition. And that really is frustrating because I'm not really trying to be in competition with other Black people. I'm not really trying to be in competition with other Indigenous people. I'm not really trying to be in competition with other trans people. I don't really understand it very much is about relationality. And the other thing that I feel too, Rosy, is that it doesn't make sense to me the way that some of these companies will say, okay, well, we're doing a Raisin in the Sun, so we need a Black dramaturg. Okay, well, we're doing this, that, or the other, so our choreographer needs to be Native, or we need to make sure that this person is this or that because we're doing this thing. We're doing a really problematic thing like the Rocky Horror Show, so we need to find a trans person to tell us it's okay. And it's like, there are Black people who really want to be dramaturgs for Noises Off. And that's their business. I can't speak to that. But we also, I think not everyone wants to be called in exclusively for jobs that are cultural competency work. That are, I'm in the room as the resident, whatever, so I can make sure that everybody's being appropriate and nobody's being appropriative and da-da-da. What if I do want to make a dance that is just really, really, really about my love for this? That is just really, and it is not about the Black arm and we're pointing back to yesterday. What if can I make work? Can I participate in work where it's not that I'm interested in my identities being muted, but I'm not interested in only being invited because of my identity. I think that my work stands on the merits of the work. I think that there is technique, there is craft, there is training, there is thought, there is intention, there's spirituality. And so I don't just want to come in to talk to you about the Black thing that you're doing. And I don't want to be compared. Yeah, I've heard similar things. Well, it's okay because we got these other people. Or if it's not you, we're committed to finding someone who's BIPOC. And it's what is that information that you're giving me? Because I have a pretty specific understanding of who I am and of where I come from and of what I could bring to this work, but you don't seem to understand that artists of color are not expendable are not disposable and are not interchangeable.
Yeah, yeah. I can think of so many instances where predominantly white institution instigated divisions between people in the American Indian theater community and other spaces I've been in that have been BIPOC. I it's a very frustrating thing, and it's about being commoditized, and it also tells the artist, well, you can only write about this specific thing or be this specific thing or make this specific thing because that's going to check the box. But when you and then that institution can't defend you as an artist because they don't know you as an artist. They don't understand why you're so excited about unexpected intersections, or I noticed that you both have these French connections, so maybe you're doing a piece on that. I want to say maybe we could have done this whole we could have done this whole thing in French. Nous allons parler français. Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to be just in the box, and then no one can defend your work or talk specifically about it. Which I definitely want to as we're kind of closing out here, this hour has gone by so fast. I want to hear about what you are passionate about. What are you doing right now? Where is your heart and your work landing you in this moment? And how? What are you guys working on?
Well, I am. My job as director of programming at Lightning Rod is to keep an eye on the overall arc of our season and our seasons. We have applications coming out for our annual intensive, which is a 2-week Flash theater program. This year, it's usually 1 week, but this year we're doing 2. I will be curating based on who we're selecting 15 artists, and they're each getting $500. And based on who those artists are, I will be curating a week of workshops with guest educators. And that's something that we're working on. We're working on getting the applications out for Q Stage, which is a program that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm about to do a show with Leah Cooper over at the Train Shed, a performance text by Ann Carson. So some acting, some actual acting. I'm joining the Actors Equity Union.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's time, I guess. So, and then Red Eyes Works in Progress comes out this Wednesday and Thursday. We're live. And then the New Works 4 Weeks Festival is just a really outstanding lineup this year of great artists. You can see me, you can see work from Malik Sisse, Akiko, Chitra, Vairavan, Leela Pierce. So many. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. Yeah. So all of that good stuff, and yeah, so much more.
That's very exciting, and I'm glad I can watch it online. Yes. What are you working on, Rosy?
I am working on a couple of things. I am going to edit a short film, just some footage I took from the installation I did at Colorado College, and I'm going to present that in a festival in New York. I'm not going to New York though. And then I have this installation at Hair and Nails Gallery. These pieces right now are really created around grieving and condoling. So the idea is creating spaces of refuge for people to rest and or contemplate grief and condole. And they lead into a larger 2-year project, which starts, the research starts now, but starts in January next year. And so I'm just in that process of writing proposals, trying to get funding. I will work with performers in July and September. We also gather together without any need to create anything. So it's just a practice that we started developing in January 2019. We will continue to do that. And this 2-year project works in a way that the people who are performing can come in and out of the project as it works for their life. And some of them may never perform in any of the installations, and some may perform more, or so it's a sort of small growing group of 12 to eventually 20 people that will be involved, like as it works for them to be involved, so that it's more, the piece is much more about process and about them finding, more refuge and rest and peace during this time, and being able to reflect on it, than it is about producing something for audiences. And that's what the installations are for. So I produce those for the audiences. And then as there is some performance here and there, we'll see how that takes shape. So the next one's at Hair and Nails, June 20th.
Okay, nice. Well, that's exciting. And as we sort of close out this hour, which has gone too fast, and wanted to acknowledge, thank you, Wendy Knox, for watching. Saw that little comment. How are you creating safe space for your body in this moment? Is there any advice you can give us?
Be picky.
Mm.
If you're a young artist and you're here in Minneapolis or wherever you are on your journey, be picky. As soon as I started saying no to people who wanted to take advantage of me and who wanted to exploit my body on stage, the work that you have to make space for the work that you want to be doing. And it's really easy to get caught up in the gig economy. It's really easy to get caught up in gigging and feeling like, well, I got in at this place and that place and this place and that place. But really be selective, and don't just take work because you think you have to be working. And I recognize that there's some privilege in that statement, very much so. I very much respect the need to feed oneself. But for me, how am I cultivating safe space for myself? It's about being very selective about who I'm going to work with, and the spaces I'm going to put myself in, and the spaces I'm going to say that I'm bringing people into.
Oh, I love it. Be picky. Yes. Rosy?
Yeah, I just wrote a 1-page, I don't know, there's another artist relief grant application, and I wrote it and I just said, I need to stop doing all of the small gigs. So I replaced a, regular income stream from being creative with one, because there's no more touring, with one that was made up of guest lecturers at colleges and teaching online and stuff like that. And while a lot of it has been really fun, there are definitely things that I probably should have said no to. Because I think that, Marcela is absolutely right. It's very difficult, but I'm asking for that now. I'm like asking from funders to be supported so that I can not be doing that anymore. I feel like I've done my time, that feeling. Like, okay, I did my time serving academia. I'm done now. Go back to being an artist, please. Yeah, that would but I think I'm getting there. You know, I don't know the advice I would give to other people, but I think it's similar. I think it's like, if you can choose to say no, do that. And if you can't, make sure you're still doing something for yourself every day, whatever that is, without any shame or guilt. I think shame and guilt is worse than like eating at McDonald's.
Mm.
Yeah.
I do. I think it is more toxic. I mean, I don't eat at McDonald's, but like if I'd craved French fries from there, I would go and eat them, and like, because but the shame and guilt that people feel about things that are in relationship to their body is actually worse for their health than, just eating a pizza. So I think that, like, the more that one can shed that shame and guilt is, yeah. Anyway, that's the last thing I have to say.
And if you're here and you're a funder, my advice is fund Rosy. Give Rosy all your money.
Yes.
That's very sweet. That would be my advice too. To you, give you money. Please give money to New Native Theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all know they need to spend down their endowment, so we're all here.
Right.
Oh, it's been so wonderful to talk to you both. And I'm very happy, very, very honored that you took the time on this long weekend to spend a little bit of time with me and with New Native Theater as we keep carving out these deeper spaces when we talk about performance. So with that, a big thank you everybody for joining us. We will be back again the last Monday of June for our next deep dive, and this time we're going to be a little controversial. We are bringing in technicians and designers and talking about how that process is so steeped in white supremacy and lack of consent. Ooh, all right. Well, so you can always tune in. It'll be the last Monday of each month, and you can always find us on Instagram and Facebook and here on this YouTube channel. So thank you, Rosy, Simas, and thank you so much, Marcela, Michelle, for joining us tonight. Everybody, have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.